In the beginning, before the winds carried the names of kings and the stars kept watch over men, there was a whisper, not from earth, nor from sky, but from the fire that danced behind the veil of time. That whisper took shape in the silence of a cave, carved not by hands, but by prophecy. And there, in the breath between thunder and prayer, a man awakened. His name was Elijah. He was not born of royal blood, nor did he wear the garments of the learned. He walked with dust on his feet and a storm in his spirit. His eyes bore witness to a world unraveling, altars broken, truth silenced, and the sacred flame nearly forgotten. The priests of Baal chanted to empty heavens, and the people bowed to gods that could not speak. Yet one voice dared to defy the tide. Persecuted, hunted, cast into the wilderness like a shadow before dawn, Elijah fled not in fear, but in purpose. The mountains opened to receive him, and the caves whispered his name. There time stood still. Ravens, ink-winged and ancient, spoke in riddles older than Scripture. The firmament bent low, unveiling creatures of light who did not walk, but hovered, watchers of divine flame. It was here that silence became his sanctuary. And in the hush of the hidden world, Elijah heard the call, not of thunder or quake, but of a still, small voice, a voice that set the stars aflame and marked him as keeper of the fire. This is not a tale of men alone. It is a chronicle of realms unseen, of celestial pacts and burning skies, of angels in exile and a prophet who bore the burden of forgotten truth. This is the story of one who stood when all had bowed, who dared to speak when heaven seemed silent. This is the silence of Elijah, and it is only the beginning. Chapter 1. The Ashes of Carmel. The wind howled like a beast unchained, tearing through the highlands of Israel with a cry that stirred ancient stones. The earth trembled beneath darkened skies, and the sacred mountain of Carmel stood cloaked in ash and silence. At its summit, where fire had once rained from heaven, only embers remained, black, smoldering reminders of a war between gods. Elijah stood alone. His cloak, frayed and dust-covered, clung to him like old prophecy. His eyes, fierce and unyielding, scanned the horizon as if waiting for the sky to speak again. He had called fire from heaven, a blaze that consumed the altar, the stones, the sacrifice, and the very water that dared to resist it. The people had fallen on their faces, crying, "The Lord, He is God." But the echo of their repentance faded quickly, swallowed by the growl of vengeance. Jezebel, queen of idols, high priestess of deception, mother of serpents. Her voice slithered through the courts of Israel, commanding the death of the prophet who dared to shame her priests. The blood of Baal's servants still soaked the soil, and now the hunter had become the hunted. Elijah fled, not in cowardice, but in divine command. For even fire needs rest before it rises again. Through thorns and shadowed forests, across valleys where no foot dared tread, the prophet moved like a ghost. Day became night. Night became wilderness, and still he walked, sustained only by the memory of God's flame and the silence that followed. On the third day, the ravens came, black-winged and watchful. They circled overhead, their caws like whispers of forgotten tongues. One landed upon a stone near the prophet's feet, tilting its head as if peering into his soul. From its beak, it dropped bread. Another meat. Elijah ate in silence, the food warm despite the cold air. They came again the next day, and the next, messengers of heaven, sent to feed the man whom angels watched. But there were more eyes upon him. In the cliffs beyond the Jordan, the caverns called to him, ancient mouths carved into the bones of the world. One such cave, hidden by cascading vines and shadowed by a great fig tree, opened like a door to eternity. Elijah entered, and time ceased. There, in that hollow place, the noise of the world faded. The rushing of rivers, the cries of beasts, even the beat of his own heart seemed distant. The air was still, yet alive, humming with power, with memory. Symbols were etched into the walls, glowing faintly with a light not of this earth. Flames flickered from cracks in the stone, though no fire burned. Elijah, a voice murmured, not from without but within. It echoed through marrow and memory, as if the rocks themselves remembered the name and reverenced it. He sat, crossing his legs upon the cool stone, and closed his eyes. Visions flooded his mind, a chariot of fire streaking across the heavens, a throne surrounded by wheels of burning sapphire, and a scroll unrolled by hands that shimmered like lightning. And then silence. Not emptiness, no. A silence filled with waiting, with presence, with the breath of the Almighty. The ravens gathered at the mouth of the cave, silent as sentinels. They watched as the prophet slept, his head bowed, his spirit rising into realms unknown. Stars passed above the hidden cave, and the moon wept silver upon the trees. In the distance, Jezebel's fury boiled. Armies gathered. The land groaned under the weight of idols and bloodshed. Yet beneath the mountain, in the quiet beyond time, a prophet dreamed, and the fire waited to rise again. Chapter 2. The Raven Covenant. The cave did not sleep. Though Elijah's body rested, his soul traveled. Through corridors of fire and shadow, through veils where mortal eyes had never gazed, he moved weightless, drawn toward a throne not made of stone or gold, but of flame and storm. Around it hovered beings of light, neither angel nor beast, their wings inscribed with the names of stars. They did not speak, for their song was silence, and in that silence Elijah heard. A voice, ancient as creation, rose like thunder muffled by wind. The fire has not died. It is hidden, guarded, waiting for the breath of obedience. Elijah opened his eyes. The cave was no longer a prison of rock, but a temple of mysteries. The walls shifted with living light. The air pulsed with unseen energy. He rose, his limbs steady, renewed. At the entrance, the ravens stirred. One stepped forward, larger than the others, its feathers edged in silver, its eyes burning like twin coals. Elijah, it spoke, not with a beak but with spirit. Its voice echoed in his mind, neither male nor female, neither human nor beast. You have entered the threshold of silence. Few are called, fewer still endure. I did not seek this, Elijah whispered. No prophet ever does, replied the raven. But fire calls fire, and you were born in the breath of the flame. The creature spread its wings, and the air rippled. We are the covenant watchers, it said, sent when heaven's flame is dimmed by man's rebellion. You called fire from above, but now you must guard it below. For a greater darkness stirs, not in palaces, but in the hearts of the people. Baal is but a mask. The enemy wears older faces. Elijah stepped forward. Then show me, teach me, that I may burn again. The ravens rose as one, black feathers filling the sky like a storm of night. They circled the cave thrice, and when they descended, their eyes glowed with starlight. Each carried a shard of crystal, humming with soundless music. One by one, they placed them before Elijah, forming a ring, a covenant. Touch the flame of heaven, they intoned. He knelt, placing his hand upon the center. Pain seared through his palm, not of flesh, but of soul. He saw visions again, a golden altar torn by wolves, priests dancing in blood, mothers handing their children to fire. And then, amidst the ruin, a figure cloaked in light, carrying a sword not of metal but of song. The figure turned. Elijah saw his own face. The fire did not consume him. It marked him. The ravens bowed. You are sealed, the leader said. The silence within you is now a beacon. Others will come, some drawn by light, others by the scent of holy fire. But beware, silence is both shield and sword. Use it well. The shards melted into the earth, leaving a glowing circle around the prophet. Then, as dawn crept over the distant hills, the ravens scattered, disappearing into clouds like shadows returning to the deep. Elijah stood alone once more, yet not alone. His heart burned with a steady fire. His steps felt guided by unseen wind. He wrapped his cloak around him and turned eastward. The world had not changed. Baal's altars still smoked. Jezebel's wrath still hunted. The people still wandered, lost between gods and shadows. But Elijah, the man of silence, the prophet of fire, had changed. He carried the voice of the flame, and the flame was waking. Chapter 3. The Frozen Time. The world outside was collapsing. Kingdoms crumbled, idols toppled, and voices rose in desperate cries to gods who no longer answered. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and ash, and beneath the weight of apostasy, the land groaned like a beast in chains. Yet within the cavern, hidden from the eyes of men, something miraculous happened. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. Elijah stepped beyond the threshold of shadow, his boots silent on the cold stone floor. The darkness here was different, alive, waiting, humming with the heartbeat of the divine. The silence was so deep it stretched like an ocean, vast and endless. No wind stirred the dust, no echo marred the stillness. It was a silence that sang. Above, the jagged ceiling of the cavern was draped with black feathers. Ravens perched on ancient stalactites, their glossy wings shimmering faintly as though kissed by starlight. Their eyes glowed like embers, burning with knowledge older than man himself. "You have entered the hourglass," whispered the silver-edged raven perched closest, its voice a mysterious echo within Elijah's mind. Here, where the threads of past and future entwine, time does not flow as men know it. It freezes, suspending moments between heartbeats, holding the breath of eternity. Elijah bowed his head, breathing in the sacred stillness. Around him, symbols carved by unseen hands flickered faintly upon the walls. Runes of flame and storm, echoes of a language forgotten by mortal tongues. The air pulsed with ancient power, a force woven from the fabric of creation itself. His mind filled with memories. The roar of the fire he had called down from heaven, the screams of priests defeated, the cold fury in Jezebel's eyes as she vowed his death. And beyond those memories, visions flickered, cities swallowed by war, families torn apart by lies, a land bathed in shadow and despair. And in the heart of it all, a tiny flicker of light, a flame struggling to survive. Elijah knelt on the stone floor, pressing his palm against the cold surface. A strange warmth spread from the touch, reaching deep into his bones. His breath slowed, sinking with the pulse of the cavern, steady, ancient, eternal. "Show me," he whispered, voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fear. "Show me the path through this darkness. Guide me through the void where even angels fear to tread." Then, as if answering his plea, a breeze stirred, not from outside, but born from within the cavern itself. It brushed against his skin like a lover's touch, wrapping him in a cloak woven from light and shadow. The air grew thick with the scent of burning cedar and frankincense, mingling with the distant sound of thunder. A voice spoke, soft yet powerful, echoing through the silence. In the silence, the fire is reborn, but it is a fire that demands sacrifice. To kindle the sacred flame, you must journey beyond the edge of light, into the shadowed realm where the lost and the forsaken dwell. There, you will face trials not of flesh, but of spirit. Only those who embrace the void shall carry the flame. Elijah's heart hammered in his chest, but he stood firm. He was a man forged in fire, tempered in wilderness. He had seen death, betrayal, and the fury of false gods. Nothing would break his resolve. The ravens watched silently, their eyes reflecting the flickering light of an unseen fire. One step forward, wings spread wide like a banner. Its voice, now clearer, spoke in words that carved themselves into Elijah's soul. "Your silence is your strength. In the stillness, you will find the power to ignite the flame that will cleanse the earth. But beware, prophet, the path will be lonely, and many will seek to snuff out your light." Elijah wrapped his cloak tightly around his shoulders and turned toward the cave's mouth. Outside, the dawn was breaking, painting the sky with streaks of blood and gold. The land awaited its salvation or its doom. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. Time resumed its flow, the frozen moment shattering like glass. The world was moving again, but Elijah was changed. No longer just a man, he was a beacon of the fire that refused to die. His silence was not emptiness, but a sacred flame waiting to roar back to life. And beyond the horizon, the storm was gathering, a tempest that would decide the fate of all. Chapter 4. The Whispering Shadows. The sun had barely risen when Elijah emerged from the cavern's embrace, stepping into a world trembling under the weight of forgotten gods and shattered faith. The air was thick with the scent of burnt offerings and despair, while distant cries echoed from towns swallowed by darkness and doubt. The prophet's eyes, sharp as flint, pierced the heavy morning haze. The silence within him was no longer an absence, but a furnace burning bright with purpose. His journey led him through a desolate valley where the land itself seemed to mourn. The soil was cracked, and brittle vines clawed at the withered trees as if desperate to grasp life before it slipped away. Shadows moved among the ruins, not just the shadows of night, but creatures woven from sorrow and deceit. Whispers carried on the wind, voices that promised power, whispered lies, and tempted the brokenhearted. Elijah moved cautiously. The whispers clawed at his resolve like serpents, but his silence was a shield forged in the fires of Carmel. His lips did not part. His heart spoke a prayer that burned hotter than any flame. The prophet knew well the darkness he faced was not merely mortal. It was a force ancient and cunning, birthed in the abyss where angels fell and light was twisted into shadow. As he walked, the air around him thickened. A cold breath brushed his skin, carrying voices that seemed to seep from the earth itself. They called to him, some with anger, others with sorrow. Yet in their multitude, one voice stood apart, soft and urgent, like the beating of wings. Elijah. The name stirred something deep within him. He stopped, closing his eyes, and the world shifted. Time slowed, and the valley blurred into a realm between worlds, where whispers became language and shadows took form. From the gathering gloom, figures emerged, cloaked in black and silver, their faces veiled in mist. They were not men, nor spirits, but something older, the whispering shadows, guardians of secrets and bearers of forgotten truth. One stepped forward, eyes glowing like dying stars. Prophet of fire, it said, voice a melody of sorrow and warning. You walk a path where silence can either save or destroy. The flame you carry is a beacon, but it also draws those who feast on light. Elijah's hand rested on the hilt of an unseen sword, the weight of his destiny pressing upon him. What do you seek from me? To understand the silence, the shadow replied. To wield the fire not just as a weapon, but as a light that reveals the hidden. You must learn to listen, not to the clamor of the world, but to the voice within the stillness. The prophet nodded, knowing the journey ahead would test every fiber of his being. The valley whispered secrets in tongues long forgotten, and Elijah's silence was the key to unlocking them. With each step deeper into the shadows, the flame within him grew stronger, a promise that even in the darkest night, fire could never be truly extinguished. Beyond the veil of whispers and shadows, the battle for the soul of Israel had already begun. Chapter 5. The Flame's Burden. Elijah's footsteps echoed softly on the cracked earth as he pressed onward through a land abandoned by hope. The once vibrant fields now lay barren, the skies overhead heavy with dark clouds that seemed to brood with anger. Every breath he took was a reminder of the weight he carried. The burden of fire, sacred and consuming, nestled deep within his soul. The flame was no mere spark. It was a living force, fierce and untamed. It burned with the power to illuminate the truth and scorch away falsehoods. Yet it demanded sacrifice in return. Elijah felt its heat in moments of quiet reflection, a steady pulse like the heartbeat of the earth itself, warning him that to wield such power was to stand on the edge of oblivion. His mind drifted back to the cavern's stillness, to the covenant sealed with the raven watchers. Their eyes, shimmering with starlight, had pierced through the veil of time, revealing a future drenched in fire and shadow. The path before him was narrow and treacherous, winding through valleys of despair and peaks of divine wrath. As he traversed a winding ridge, the prophet's gaze caught sight of a gathering storm in the distance, a tempest not born of the heavens, but of the very earth beneath. Lightning cracked like celestial swords, and thunder rolled like the drumbeat of an approaching army. He knew the storm was both a warning and a herald. From the shadows beside the path, figures emerged, men and women marked by sorrow, their eyes hollow, their hearts shackled by fear and false faith. They had been touched by the darkness, tempted by the promises of Baal's priests, who spun webs of lies as intricate as the night sky. Elijah's voice, usually reserved, rang out like a clarion call. Turn from the shadow. The fire you seek is not of destruction, but of redemption. Some turned away, clutching hope like fragile glass. Others sneered, blinded by the chains of their own making. The prophet's silence grew heavy, a weight that pressed down like the mountain itself. Yet within that silence was a fire unquenchable, a light that refused to be dimmed. In the gathering twilight, Elijah raised his hands, and the air around him shimmered with the promise of flame. From the depths of his being, a spark leapt forth, igniting the night with a blaze that chased back the shadows. The flame danced in his eyes, reflecting the ancient covenant, a covenant to restore the true light in a world lost to darkness. But the fire came with a price. In that moment, Elijah understood. To bear the flame was to embrace solitude, to face the fury of gods and men alike. It was a calling that demanded not just courage, but sacrifice beyond measure. The prophet's journey was far from over. The silence within him was no longer a refuge. It was a battlefield, and the war for the soul of the world had only just begun. Chapter 6. The Covenant of Shadows. Night fell swiftly over the barren land, draping the world in a velvet cloak embroidered with cold stars. Elijah sat beneath the twisted limbs of a dead tree, its branches clawing at the sky like desperate fingers. The flame within him flickered gently, a living ember that refused to die despite the suffocating darkness pressing in from every side. Around him, silence ruled, but it was no ordinary silence. It was a silence thick with ancient power, a sacred stillness that wrapped the world like a shroud. The wind whispered faintly through the skeletal branches, carrying the scent of distant fires and forgotten prayers. Elijah closed his eyes and breathed deeply, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath him, steady and unyielding. His mind wandered back to the cavern, that timeless sanctuary where the ravens had spoken and the fabric of reality had bent. In that frozen moment, Elijah had forged a bond with beings that existed beyond mortal understanding, creatures of shadow and starlight known as the Watchers. Neither holy angels nor men. They stood as sentinels at the boundary between worlds, guarding secrets older than the stars. From the gathering darkness, shapes began to emerge, figures cloaked in shifting twilight, their forms flickering like smoke caught in a gentle breeze. Their eyes glowed with an eerie light, reflecting knowledge both terrible and profound. One stepped forward, her voice a soft melody woven from the threads of shadow and hope. "Prophet of fire," she said, "you walk a perilous path where flame and darkness intertwine. The covenant you have entered binds not only the light, but also the shadows. To restore the sacred fire, you must embrace both halves of the whole, the fierce blaze of heaven and the quiet strength found in silence." Elijah opened his eyes and met her gaze. He knew that power was never given without price. The Watchers offered no simple gifts or easy victories, only truths wrapped in riddles and burdens heavy to bear. He understood now that the flame inside him was more than a weapon. It was a test, a sacred trust that demanded wisdom and courage beyond measure. "The world is broken," another voice whispered from the shadows, deep and resonant as distant thunder. "False gods rise and fall like waves upon the shore. Kingdoms crumble, and men forget the ancient promises whispered by the winds. But the flame endures, hidden deep within the heart of the faithful, waiting for one who will wield it not with rage, but with unwavering resolve. Elijah's jaw tightened. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness, fraught with dangers seen and unseen. His alliance with the Watchers was fragile, like a spider's web glistening in moonlight, delicate, yet strong enough to hold the weight of destiny. Suddenly, a sharp cry cut through the stillness, the haunting call of ravens echoing across the night. Elijah rose to his feet, his cloak billowing like a banner before the storm. His silence was no longer just a refuge from the world. It was a summons to battle. With the Watchers at his side, the prophet prepared to journey deeper into the unknown. Beyond lay the shadows that sought to smother the flame of true faith forever. The covenant of shadows had been sealed. The war for the sacred fire was entering a new and dangerous chapter, one where silence and flame would clash in the heart of darkness. Chapter 7. The Raven's Oath. The first light of dawn stretched across the sky, spilling gold and crimson over the scarred earth beneath Elijah's feet. He stood atop a rugged hill, the wind tugging at his cloak, carrying the bitter scent of smoke and sorrow. Below, the land bore the wounds of forgotten battles, villages burned to ash, and fields left fallow where hope had once taken root. Yet, amidst this desolation, a fire flickered within Elijah, a silent, unyielding flame born not of destruction, but of fierce resolve. Above him, the ravens circled in dark spirals, their wings cutting the air with steady precision. These were no ordinary birds. They were the silent watchers of the covenant, messengers from realms beyond mortal sight. Their calls echoed like ancient chants, filling the dawn with an eerie melody. Elijah had come to understand their language, a whispered code of wings and shadows, secrets passed from one generation of watchers to the next. As the prophet descended the hill, his thoughts tumbled like storm-driven leaves. Memories of the cavern's timeless silence, the sacred bond forged in shadows and fire, and the faces of those lost to the creeping darkness pressed heavily upon him. The priests of Baal, relentless and cruel, spread their false idols and twisted worship across the land, ensnaring the hearts of the desperate and proud alike. In a hollowed valley choked with thorn and bramble, Elijah found a small gathering, villagers marked by hardship, their eyes sunken but flickering with cautious hope. Among them stood a woman, her hands roughened by labor, yet her spirit unbroken despite the scars of loss. "Elijah," she said softly, her voice trembling but resolute, "does the fire still burn? Can your silence break the chains that bind us in fear?" Elijah met her gaze with steady eyes. "The fire never left," he said, his voice a steady drumbeat against the quiet. "It lives in the hearts of those who dare to believe. But to rekindle it, we must stand united, through shadow, flame, and storm." Night began to fall as Elijah gathered the villagers beneath a vast canopy of stars. The ravens wheeled above, their cries weaving a haunting chorus through the cool air. Raising his hands to the heavens, Elijah summoned the flame that dwelled within, a radiant blaze that cut through the darkness like a sword of light. It was a beacon, a promise to all who had lost faith. The sacred flame could be restored, not by might alone, but through silence, strength, and unwavering trust in the true God. The oath was sealed, not merely a vow of fire, but a pledge of courage and unity. The fight for the soul of the land was no longer Elijah's burden alone. It belonged to every heart willing to kindle the sacred flame. And beneath the watchful gaze of the ravens, the prophet and his new allies prepared to face the coming storm, a battle that would test the very limits of faith and fire. Chapter 8. Flames in the Wilderness. The wilderness stretched endlessly before Elijah, a vast expanse of rugged hills and shadowed valleys where the sun's warmth struggled to penetrate. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, but beneath it lay a restless power, an ancient force waiting to be awakened. Elijah's steps were steady, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where storm clouds churned with a slow, ominous rhythm. The flame inside him pulsed stronger with every mile, as if responding to the land's silent cry. This was a place forgotten by men, but remembered by the spirits of earth and sky. Here, the sacred fire could burn pure, untainted by the corruption that plagued the kingdoms below. But the journey was treacherous, filled with unseen dangers that tested not only the body but the spirit. As he ventured deeper, the silence around him grew profound. No bird sang, no breeze stirred the leaves. Time seemed to fold upon itself, and Elijah felt the weight of centuries pressing upon his shoulders. In this wilderness, every shadow was alive with memory. Every stone whispered secrets. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, Elijah caught a flicker of movement, shapes darting between the trees, watching, waiting. The watchers of the forest, creatures born of earth and flame, eyes gleaming with ancient wisdom and fierce loyalty. They had come at the call of the covenant, drawn to the prophet's sacred purpose. One stepped forward, a great stag, antlers glowing faintly like embers in the dusk. Its gaze met Elijah's with a solemn intensity. "The fire you carry is more than light," the stag seemed to say without words. "It is the heart of creation, the breath of the eternal. But beware, for the darkness that hunts you is clever and relentless." The priests of Baal send their shadows to snuff out this flame before it can ignite hope once more. Elijah bowed his head in gratitude and resolve. The path ahead was no longer solitary. The wilderness itself was awakening to his cause, aligning with the ancient covenant. The flame within him flared, casting dancing shadows on the forest floor, illuminating a path of destiny. That night, beneath a sky heavy with stars, Elijah kindled a fire, not just a blaze of wood and smoke, but a sacred ritual. He called upon the spirits of earth, air, and fire, invoking their strength to shield the flame within him and to guide him through the darkness yet to come. As the flames roared and crackled, the silence shattered, replaced by a chorus of whispers and the soft beating of wings. The covenant was alive, pulsing through the very heart of the wilderness. Elijah's journey was far from over, but with the fire as his guide and the watchers as his allies, he stepped forward into the night, ready to face whatever shadows dared to challenge the light. Chapter 9. The Shadow's Edge. The night was a tapestry of deep indigo and flickering stars as Elijah ventured closer to the borderlands, a realm where the light of the sacred flame waned and shadows stretched long and hungry. The air itself seemed heavier here, thick with whispers of despair and forgotten promises. Every step forward was met with resistance, not just from the land, but from the very darkness that sought to consume the prophet's fire. Elijah's heart beat steady, the flame inside him a beacon against the creeping gloom. Around him, the trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches clawing like desperate hands reaching for the fading light. The ground beneath his feet was soft and cold, soaked with the echoes of battles long past, where faith had faltered and hope had been crushed. From the shadows emerged figures, cloaked in black, their faces hidden but eyes burning with malice. The priests of Baal had sent their hunters, spectral wraiths bound by dark magic, relentless in their pursuit. They moved like smoke, silent and swift, eager to snuff out the sacred fire before it could rekindle the world's faith. Elijah stood firm, the flames within roaring to life, casting flickering light that pushed back the encroaching darkness. His voice rose in a chant, ancient words passed down through generations, a call to the covenant bound in silence and fire. The watchers answered, their forms appearing like ghostly phantoms from the night, ravens, stags, and creatures of twilight, each embodying the sacred pact. A fierce battle unfolded beneath the moon's cold gaze. Shadows clashed with light, steel met spirit, and the air crackled with power beyond mortal comprehension. Elijah moved with the grace of one who understood both flame and silence, each strike a prayer, each movement a testament to unwavering faith. But the darkness was cunning, twisting and shifting, seeking weakness. At a moment when Elijah's strength wavered, a raven swooped low, its sharp talons raking through the nearest wraith, buying him precious seconds to rally. The watchers fought alongside the prophet, bound by the covenant and the promise of a restored flame. As dawn's first light broke over the horizon, the shadows retreated, dissolving like mist before the sun's embrace. Elijah, though weary and battered, stood victorious, a beacon of hope in a world teetering on the edge of oblivion. But he knew this was only the beginning. The true battle for the flame's survival had just begun, and darker forces yet awaited in the silence beyond. Chapter 10. The Flames of Rebellion. The sun rose slowly over the scarred land, spilling pale light across valleys torn by war and whispered defiance. Elijah walked among the scattered villages, a solitary figure draped in worn robes, carrying within him a flame that flickered with fierce determination. The sacred fire burned deep inside, a beacon of hope amidst a world suffocating under the weight of lies and false gods. The priests of Baal, their hearts hardened by cruelty and fear, had unleashed dark armies to crush any spark of rebellion. Their banners, black as the void, flapped like ominous shadows over fields stained with the blood of the fallen. Soldiers marched with relentless hunger, eager to snuff out the true fire before it could grow into an unstoppable blaze. Elijah's steps led him to the heart of the uprising, a ragged encampment of souls bound by faith, not merely by sword. Men and women, weary yet unyielding, gathered beneath tattered tents, their eyes reflecting a desperate hope. Here, the sacred flame was more than a symbol. It was a lifeline, a promise that even in the darkest night, light could prevail. The prophet's voice rose, steady and resolute, cutting through the murmur of uncertain hearts. The flame of God is not to be feared, but embraced. It burns within each one of us, a spark that no shadow can extinguish. Stand with me, and together we will restore the covenant, rebuild what has been broken, and reclaim the true light that has been stolen from this land. As dusk draped the sky in blood-red hues, preparations for the coming battle unfolded. Elijah moved through the camp, eyes blazing with conviction, heart pounding like a war drum. This fight was more than a battle for territory. It was a war for souls, a desperate struggle to reclaim the sacred flame from the grasp of darkness. Night descended, and the rebel camp's flames roared defiantly against the looming shadows. Elijah knelt before the fire, hands raised in solemn prayer, calling upon the watchers, the spirits of the covenant who stood as silent guardians of the sacred flame. Their ethereal forms shimmered in the firelight, reminding all who beheld them of the ancient pact binding prophet, people, and spirit alike. The battle ahead would test every ounce of faith and courage. Elijah's silence was no longer a retreat, but a shield, a vow to guard the sacred flame with his very soul. The first stars pierced the velvet night as the prophet rose, his spirit aflame with the promise of dawn, ready to face the darkness yet to come. Chapter 11. The Covenant's Trial. The dawn broke over a land still trembling from the echoes of battle, yet beneath the fragile calm, an ancient power stirred. Elijah stood at the edge of a vast desert, where the sands whispered secrets carried from forgotten times. The sacred flame within him flickered, a beacon calling him toward a destiny both perilous and profound. The covenant demanded more than courage. It required sacrifice. The watchers had made it clear. To truly restore the flame of the true God, Elijah must face a trial beyond mortal bounds, one that would test his faith, his spirit, and the very essence of his being. As he ventured into the heart of the desert, the heat pressed down like a living weight. Time itself seemed to dissolve into endless waves of shimmering light and shadow. Visions danced at the edges of his sight, echoes of prophets past, the cries of a broken people, and the silent gaze of the divine. Night fell with a sudden chill, and Elijah found himself surrounded by a circle of ancient stones, each etched with symbols older than memory. Here, in this sacred place, the trial would begin. The watchers appeared beside him, ravens, stags, and ethereal figures whose eyes glowed with timeless wisdom. The silence stretched, heavy with expectation. Elijah closed his eyes and surrendered to the flame within, allowing it to burn away doubt, fear, and weakness. The desert winds howled, carrying voices from realms unseen, testing his resolve. Visions unfolded, a tempest of fire and shadow, where Elijah faced the darkness that sought to claim his soul. Every step was a battle, every breath a prayer. Yet the flame did not falter. It grew brighter, a living fire fueled by unwavering faith. Through trials of flame, silence, and shadow, Elijah emerged transformed. The sacred fire within him burned pure and fierce, a beacon not only for himself, but for all who would follow. As dawn broke once more, the desert's silence was broken by a chorus of wings. The watchers took flight, their cries echoing a promise. The covenant endured, and the flame would never die. Elijah, weary yet unbroken, raised his eyes to the rising sun. His journey was far from over, but the trial had forged him anew. The true battle for the soul of the land awaited, and he would face it with the fire of heaven burning in his heart. Chapter 12. The Veil of Shadows. Elijah's journey took him into the realm where light and darkness entwined, a shifting labyrinth where the boundaries between worlds thinned and the air thrummed with restless power. Beneath his feet, the earth twisted and groaned as if alive, and every step forward plunged him deeper into a realm steeped in shadows, both ancient and malevolent. The priests of Baal, desperate to snuff out the sacred flame, had woven a dark curse over the land, summoning living shadows that moved with will and malice. These shadows were not mere absence of light, but fierce entities, writhing and stretching their tendrils to choke hope and suffocate faith. Elijah's inner flame burned fiercely, a defiant beacon against the encroaching darkness. But even that fire was tested in this realm of gloom. Whispers slithered from the shadows, voices laced with doubt and despair, aimed at unraveling the prophet's spirit. The silence that once shielded him now felt like a prison, cold and unyielding, pressing inward to silence the sacred fire. Yet Elijah held steadfast, chanting the ancient words of power, the covenant's call that bound him to the watchers of the firmament. Suddenly, from the swirling darkness emerged a figure, an apparition of grief and rage, formed from the broken hopes of a fallen world. It spoke not in words, but in silence heavy with sorrow, its eyes burning with the anguish of countless lost souls. Elijah understood this was no mere enemy, but a trial to test the strength of his compassion and faith. Drawing deeply upon the flame within, Elijah summoned a light so pure and fierce that it pierced through the veil of shadows. The apparition writhed, shrieking in silent agony as it dissolved into a shower of shimmering sparks. Each spark scattered across the darkness, slowly unraveling the curse and peeling back the shadows to reveal the light beneath. Guided by the watcher's silent presence, Elijah pressed forward, each step an act of unwavering faith and courage. The veil of shadows was not simply an obstacle, but a revelation, a reminder that darkness exists only as the counterpart to light, that one defines the other in an eternal dance. As the first golden rays of dawn broke over the horizon, the labyrinth gave way to an open plain bathed in radiant light. Elijah stood tall, his inner flame roaring like a celestial fire, ready to face the final trials awaiting in the heart of the apostate world. Chapter 13. The Heart of Apostasy. Elijah stepped beyond the edge of the light, into a land where the very air seemed tainted with the breath of forsaken gods. The heart of apostasy lay before him, a place where faith was a flickering ember, struggling to survive amid the ashes of broken covenants and forgotten promises. The ground was cracked and barren, scarred by the footsteps of those who had turned away from the true flame. The sky above swirled with ominous clouds, casting a pall over the desolation below. Here, the priests of Baal ruled with iron hands, their dark altars stained with the blood of the faithful. Their voices, once muffled whispers, now roared across the land, calling forth shadows and corruption to choke out any hope of redemption. Elijah's steps were steady, his heart ablaze with the fire of conviction. He knew that to reclaim this forsaken place, he would need more than the flame within. He would need the alliance forged with the Watchers, the celestial beings who had pledged their strength and wisdom to his cause. They gathered at his side, their ethereal forms shimmering with the light of stars, silent sentinels in a world lost to darkness. The prophet's voice cut through the heavy silence. "The flame of the true God still burns," he declared, "though it may be hidden beneath ashes and despair. We will ignite that fire once more, and through it, restore the covenant and the promise of salvation." Dark forces stirred in response, sending forth twisted creatures born of shadow and malice to challenge the prophet and his celestial allies. The battle was fierce and unrelenting. Steel clashed with spectral claws, light collided with darkness in a violent dance. Elijah moved with the grace of one who carried the fire of heaven, each strike a prayer, each step a testament to unwavering faith. As the fight wore on, the sacred flame within Elijah blazed brighter, feeding on the courage of the oppressed and the promise of renewal. The Watchers lent their power, their voices rising in a silent hymn that resonated through the battlefield, shattering the chains of apostasy. When the dust settled and the shadows fled, Elijah stood triumphant amidst the ruins, the flame in his heart a beacon to all who would follow. The heart of apostasy had been pierced by the fire of truth, and the path to redemption was once again illuminated. Yet Elijah knew the war was far from over. The flames of faith had been rekindled, but the shadows still lurked, waiting for a moment to return. The final trials awaited, and the prophet's silence would soon be broken by the roar of a fire that could change the fate of the world. Chapter 14. The Rising Flame. The winds of change swept across the land as Elijah stood atop a cragged cliff, the vast horizon stretching endlessly before him. The sacred flame within burned fiercely, a radiant beacon against the gathering storm. Around him, the once fractured forces of rebellion had begun to unite, their spirits kindled by the hope and conviction the prophet had rekindled. But the path ahead was fraught with danger. The priests of Baal, desperate and cunning, marshaled their forces for a final assault, their dark magic twisting the very earth beneath them. The skies roared with thunder as armies clashed on fields stained with blood and fire. Yet, amidst the chaos, Elijah remained resolute, a living testament to the power of faith. The Watchers, ethereal and steadfast, flitted silently among the gathered warriors, their presence a reminder of the covenant that bound heaven and earth. Elijah raised his voice, a clarion call that echoed across the battlefield. "Let the flame of the true God blaze forth. Let no shadow dim the light that guides us." With every word, the flame within Elijah grew, spreading like wildfire through the hearts of the faithful. Warriors charged with renewed vigor, their swords shimmering with celestial light. The ground trembled beneath the fury of their battle cries, a symphony of hope against despair. Yet, the priests of Baal wielded their dark arts with relentless fury, conjuring storms of shadow and flame. Elijah faced them without fear, his silence broken by the roar of the sacred fire. His voice rang out like thunder, a proclamation of divine wrath and mercy intertwined. The battle raged through the night, a clash of worlds where light and darkness fought for dominion. Elijah moved like a force of nature, every strike igniting the air with sacred energy. The Watchers soared above, their wings beating in time with the pulse of the flame. As dawn approached, the tide turned. The priests' dark magic waned, their armies faltered, and the light of the true flame blazed brighter than ever. Elijah stood victorious but weary, the flame within him a beacon of hope for a world reborn. The rising flame was more than fire. It was the promise of renewal, a testament that even in the deepest shadow, the light of God endures. Elijah's silence had ended, and with it, a new chapter began for the faithful. Chapter 15, The Eternal Flame. The dawn broke in a blaze of gold and crimson, bathing the land in the light of a new beginning. Elijah stood atop the highest peak, the wind whispering ancient songs around him. The sacred flame within his heart burned with an eternal fire, a light forged through trials of shadow, silence, and unyielding faith. The world he had fought to save stretched before him, scarred but breathing, broken yet hopeful. The priests of Baal had been vanquished, their dark reign shattered by the power of the true God's flame. The covenant was restored, not as a fragile promise, but as an unbreakable bond woven into the very fabric of creation. Elijah looked to the sky, where the watchers circled like celestial guardians, their eyes shining with timeless wisdom. They had stood by his side through every trial, their silent strength a testament to the enduring power of faith. Together, they had kindled a fire that no darkness could ever extinguish. Yet Elijah knew that the battle was not only one of swords and shadows, but of hearts and souls. The flame he carried was a beacon for all who sought truth in a world that often wavered on the edge of despair. It was a call to rise, to remember, to believe. As the sun climbed higher, Elijah's voice rose in a final declaration, carried on the wind like a sacred hymn. The flame of God is eternal. It lives in each of us, an unquenchable fire that guides, that heals, that redeems. Let this light be your shield and your sword, your refuge and your strength. From the valleys below, voices answered, a chorus of faith renewed, of hearts ignited by the prophet's unwavering spirit. The flame spread like wildfire across the land, a living testament that even in the deepest silence, the fire of God burns on. Elijah turned from the dawn, his journey far from over, but his purpose clear. The prophet of fire had fulfilled his mission, yet the eternal flame would continue to burn, through generations, through ages, an undying light in a world forever changed.